Hi, I'm Alex Miller, and this is the Citi Institute podcast, where we explore the forces shaping finance, the global economy, and the way we live and work. In each episode, today included, we bring you insights from thought leaders and innovators driving change, helping you stay informed, navigate challenges, and seize opportunities in a rapidly evolving world.
So for us to be successfully deploying fast-moving technologies like agentic AI and generative AI, we very much focus on our people.
So you think about generative AI, it's reactive. Agentic is basically running things autonomously. Generative AI and agentic AI combined, and clearly it's the joint force that makes a big difference.
So today we're diving deep into a topic that is of course reshaping not just the financial landscape, but multiple landscapes, artificial intelligence. We're going to be unpacking how the combined force of generative AI and agentic AI is accelerating change at multiple organizations. We'll be focusing on the importance of data quality, marshalling the right technical resources, as well as having domain expertise, and how irrespective of organizational type or geographic location, the imperative to leverage AI, not just for productivity and the perennial pressure to do more with less, but also the tantalizing prospect of unlocking new markets, new ways of doing business. I'm delighted today to be joined by Helen Krause, who runs in the client org here at Citi, our global data science team, and who brings with her extensive buy-side and sell-side quantitative experience, and Prag Sharma, formerly head of Citi's AI Centre for Excellence and now analyst in the Future of Finance team at the Citi Institute, who, like Helen, regularly advises corporate clients, governments, regulators, and the like on the world of AI. So, enough of me. Let's start. Okay, Helen, please give us a flavour for what you do here at Citi, and then maybe you could walk us through your recent report, AI in Investment Management, and obviously it highlights a significant shift in the institutional investment industry. Why did you write it, and I guess what's the core message that you're looking to convey via it?
Sure, Alex, thanks for the opportunity. I run the data science team within the client organization, specifically for marketing content. And our remit, obviously, talking about data science, but recently it's AI machine learning, and obviously with the Gen AI in front and center, we've been looking at this space for a number of years. And the reason why we decided to write this report, which is actually the second in series, if I may said, obviously with November 2022, ChatGPT 3.5 coming to the market, there was a kind of the wow moment, if you like, to a lot of investment management firms. And on the back of that, we decided to do the first report. And that report came out more than a year ago. It was mainly kind of stating the fact that most firms are at the very early stage of AI adoption. So a lot of focuses on efficiency, operating side of things, less about front office application. And the reason why we decided to do this report is really to highlight the major shifts in terms of the use cases from the middle office, back office to really to front office applications, and thinking about beyond efficiency gains, what could AI tooling do for investment management firms, specifically on the combination of generative AI and agentic AI combined for the research front office functions.
And your point there, of course, presumably is that it's not just about being more efficient. There's a lot more which investors are trying to explore.
Yeah, I think the first time when we did this report, there's a lot of questions about the return on investment, the ROI question. So while it is true that you can talk about cost save and efficiencies gains, and you could say that they translate into some sort of dollar saved, it doesn't necessarily bring in the hard, tangible P&L impact, especially for investment management firms. Some firms are actually emphasizing on, okay, what does it mean from alpha generation, return generations? But this is and the highlight for the report is that basically we are hearing the firms are talking about having a tangible return generation really coming from the AI technology, this tooling, allowing them to do compared to 12 months ago. So 12 months later, we have completely different kind of applications, if you like, and a different mindset as well, looking at the ROI.
Just remind our listeners here, Helen, who or what type of investors, what type of roles you were speaking with and where they were.
Yes, so we talk to many different asset management firms. It ranges from hedge funds, sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, as well as global asset management firms, mid-sized firms, really to understand from regardless of what type of firms you are, to understand their journey in terms of how they're thinking about this and adoption and how there's been changing again over the last 12 months or so.
That's fascinating. And then maybe if we sort of dive a little bit further, you talk in your report around generative AI and agentic AI and how the two together are fundamentally reshaping from here the investment management industry beyond that efficiency gain to sort of something more advanced. I know I certainly was drawn by graph neural networks, explainable AI, a few different concepts. Can you just give a sense of how these, I guess, these new innovations come into alpha generation and how AI helps deliver that?
Yeah, first of all, I think generative AI and agentic AI combined clearly it's the joint force that makes a big difference. So you think about generative AI, it's reactive in the sense that it reacts to your prompting. If you think about agentic, it's basically running things autonomously and then being able to react to the environment, react to the settings and so on. So if you think about a combination of that, it allows investment management firms to really set a task and say, okay, go and research on this particular data source or this information sources, and then trying to come back with something that is usable from the investment perspective. So it allows them to see that through. And the combination basically allowed them to do this at scale and autonomously in a way that I guess previously was not possible. And we know that from the fact that some firms are already talking about managing a team of virtual AI research assistants right now. So in terms of explainable AI and graph that you talked about, it's really I guess the latest thinking is, okay, the more we use generative AI, how can we make sure it's explainable? Ultimately, you need to be able to articulate how you make that decision. So we remain that, very focused on the human in the loop aspect. But at the same time, because the fact that you're able to do so much with the AI tooling for the non-technical audience, or actually for your fund holders, your stakeholders, so you need to be able to explain how the responses that you get from Gen AI tools can be articulated in an understandable manner. So there's XAI for Gen AI because of that. In terms of the graph, I would say that maybe it's more the phenomenon this year when we have a lot of kind of tariffs, the kind of tension and things like that. And so the clear use case would be looking at supply chain, right? So if you think about supply chain resilience and supply chain network, it's a graph representation. So how do you look beyond tier 1 and 2 and go through like 3, 4, 5? It's very difficult to a human eye to really articulate what the relationship or what the common suppliers is or the common bottleneck is. But using agentic together with Gen AI, you'll be able to get the information, synthesize that hidden relationship, you want to call it, in a much more easily retrievable way. So that's one clear applications of that. But I think also other applications I think we highlighted in the report is to understand the signal generation from the tactical to more strategic, and then being able to use that also for time series forecasting. Again, that is not something that we even thought would be possible more than 12 months ago.
Fantastic. So you've both got some new representation graphically of complex relationships that would have been hard to perhaps put onto paper, so to speak, before, as well as a whole set of kind of perhaps fiduciary duty driven, looking for greater transparency. Yeah, I know you've been speaking to a lot of institutional investors since the publication of your report, and no doubt getting a lot of questions, a lot of feedback. From your perspective, I guess, where's the questions that you're hearing most prominently from different types of investors landing?
I think it's quite clear that everybody's on the AI journey. So depending on the type of firms and then also at what stage their AI adoption journey currently is at, they have different type of question, understandably so. But it's quite clear that everyone is worried about being left behind. and then looking for practical tips like how can we broaden AI adoption within their organization. What would be the really tangible outcome we can aim to achieve with this tooling? And the type of questions really ranges a lot from sophistication to things that maybe like, okay, how should we set our data strategy? Taking the back to the core, say, okay, how can we trust the output from the tooling? To others, say, okay, if the agentic AI is now the word for this year, or the buzzword, should we say, for this year, what will be for next year? And I think it's quite clear from several more advanced users that is even more agentic. Right now, agentic actually is at the very beginning stage of helping with horizontal tooling, but it's not so much yet having like a vertical, so very specific use cases and that type of tooling being built out. So I think that next year is going to be even more agentic, but maybe on the vertical sense.
Interesting. Well, maybe that's a good moment, and thank you, Helen, to turn the conversation to you, Prag. And just firstly, welcome and remind us perhaps of your experience in this space. And then perhaps I could ask you, thinking of your experience, how companies, large organizations that we talk to are themselves approaching the task of, I guess, how do you succeed in AI implementation? Broadening out the conversation from the institutional investment world.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for having me. So my name is Prag Sharma, and I'm part of the Future of Finance team here in Citi Institute, and I'm very much focused on emerging technologies. And as you know, when we talk about emerging technologies today, it is a lot about agentic AI and generative AI. So I'm very much focused on that. In the past, I led Citi's Artificial Intelligence Center of Excellence, the aim of which was for an organization like Citi to use AI responsibly across the entirety of that organization. Now, it's a word that's easily said, but difficult to implement in practice given the scope of the organization, but also how fast this technology is moving. So to your question in terms of, how easy it is, or what are the key things that large organizations need to do? Well, the very short answer is, with a lot of careful planning and structured execution, can you get this right? So behind the scenes, there's a lot of work going on to ensure that, just like any other technology, we are implementing this with the right robust governance and risk and controls in place. At the end of the day, this is a technology, and you have to very much approach it as a technology. But to be successful, you have to look beyond the fact that it is a technology. And for large organizations like ourselves, we have key pillars that we focus on. So for us to be successfully deploying fast-moving technologies like agentic AI and generative AI, we very much focus on our people. We focus on the processes, which means the use cases. Clearly, nothing can be done without the technology, as we mentioned, but there's also infrastructure as well, not just the software, but the hardware. And then, most importantly, data, which I think Helen is also mentioning. And others, without data, some of the use cases that Helen has been talking about are difficult to execute. And finally, nothing moves without governance. So for us to really deploy this technology successfully across the organization, we are equally focusing on each of these 5 pillars.
Okay, so I'm an organization. I know I want to be in this space. I've got different degrees of sophistication or deep pockets. How do I think about sort of that buy versus build dilemma in terms of developing my capabilities? And I guess how do you think about advising organizations on this sort of decision?
Yeah. I mean, it's a good question. And as you know, build versus buy is not unique to generative AI. All large organizations, small organizations, and others have to focus on the build versus buy question every time they're looking to utilize a new technology. From that perspective, it's not new. But actually, generative AI and agentic AI brings a number of new concepts to this build versus buy equation that we really need to think about in detail. So some of the largest models require significant amount of hardware investment and capex to begin with. In fact, some of the latest numbers on the best models that all of us use at home for free actually have required hundreds of millions of dollars to train behind the scenes. I'm thinking of some of the largest models. Now, this training does go down if you're looking to fine tune, obviously. I'm talking about training foundation models, but there is a huge capex. So from a build versus buy perspective, many of the largest models to train from scratch is out of the question. And that is a key consideration. Some of the other things we need to focus on focus in the space when it comes to build versus buy is, do you want to distinguish yourself in a particular use case or area? Is there intellectual property involved when building some of these things out? These are all the things we look at. There's also many other ways that this technology is coming into the organization. It's not simply build versus buy if you think about it. You have to obviously build or buy. We work with the largest organizations to provide us with the largest models where we can't build. What we also do is we make ourselves open source models available within the organization, which is interesting. So you can imagine that open source models are your buy component or your build component where you can fine-tune those in-house. And then some of our existing vendors, for example, are also providing AI through existing products and services. So for large organizations or organizations with different set of resources, they will have to focus differently, answering some of the points we were making earlier from their own perspective to land on that build versus buy scenario.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I guess, Helen, also it's something that you've been grappling with investors and corporates, I know, in terms of there's many different fintech companies that are emerging, proposing a whole host of solutions. How are your thoughts around that? I guess, the companies looking to begin their AI journey, practical steps, you can see how partnering is a very sort of, attractive first step.
Yeah, I mean, definitely buy versus build dilemma was mentioned multiple times when we talked to the investors. I think the consideration are not that dissimilar to what Brock just mentioned. Basically boils down to two things: the ease of integration to your existing kind of tech stack and how you can incorporate it into your organization seamlessly. Second thing is about your proprietary model and data, right? So obviously you don't want it to be leaked out of your organization. And to the extent that I think, especially now, so much focus on the front office application on terms of R&D part of it. It's really down to like, okay, if you have a proprietary data, you have a model, you want to build that. You will not necessarily want to buy it from the outside. So those are the two dimensions I'll say that firms should consider on the investment management side.
Interesting. And then I guess, both of you have mentioned this in terms of that sort of data strategy being integral for success on a go-forward basis. Again, when you're talking to either investment firms, Helen, or others, how do you kind of, I guess, identify those key components of an effective or successful data strategy?
Yeah, I say that when we did the first report, it was quite clear that some firms mentioned they will not be able to embark on the AI journey if they haven't got their data strategy sorted, meaning having all the data they have collectively within the firm into one centralized data lake. But that is very hard to do when you have a bigger company and more complicated structure. So that might not necessarily be very economical to wait until then and then being able to really harvest what the technology could do. But one thing I'll say is quite interesting is that because of agentic AI being made available, you could have a central agent to control the underlying agents that are responsible for the data silos. So it's not an ideal outcome, but it kind of allows you to utilize the technology as of now. So it's kind of headless structure. So you can have orchestrated agents. So whenever you want to use AI tooling for something, then you can then get the agent, the central agent, to send the underlying agent to pull the information from the respective data silos. And you can say that in that sense, you still have this respective team, the data owner, who will be able to ensure the quality of those data silos. And at the same time, you are able to get the information out centrally if need be.
So central agents drawing it out.
Actually, maybe I can comment on that as well. Yeah, I think Helen's point is super there. Because it's sort of talking about something from a data perspective that we always think we need to get all our data in order before we get value out of this. But maybe agentic AI systems can bridge or help leapfrog organizations that may have data in silos, but could use generative AI or agentic AI systems to bring it together by maybe fine-tuning the models. That does have risks. They can become single points of failure, for example, but it does mean that your data journey can be accelerated for some use cases. And one other quick point to make here is, what's interesting is you may not need a full data strategy to eke some value out of generative AI today. For example, if you have access to the biggest and best models, you're able to summarize, extract information, compare documents by simply inputting it into the prompt, for example. So there is some value there to be had straight away. But Helen is absolutely right. After you have made those horizontal use cases, as we call them, available to all the organization where everybody gets an incremental benefit out of it, you then want smaller cohort of people getting more or strategic benefits out of use cases. And this is where, to Helen's point, your data comes in. And that is the differentiating factor between today's use cases and the vertical use cases. And the recent study pointed to that exactly being the differentiator for many use cases failing to reach production.
That's fascinating. But one of the pushbacks or I guess concerns that we hear a lot, particularly from companies that perhaps don't have, huge numbers of employees, huge pools of available kind of budget is, okay, how do I know my data is safe? How do I, know that my data is not going to get sort of leaked inappropriately, etc.? Prag, just talk to us about a couple of the things that, CFOs, CTOs, should and are thinking about with regards to that question.
Yeah, it's a key concern, correct? There's many different angles to us make for data leaving your organization, even if it is with the largest multinationals that have seriously good information security and cyber security postures. Even then, we want to be careful with our data. So there's a number of approaches here. For example, large organizations can look at having their own versions of a particular large model that is within their space that nobody else has access to. But then the tech providers will provide you with the right level of SOC 2 compliance, for example. For others, you need to have tools in place that can scrub or look at the data that is leaving your organization. So many startups now specialize in looking at your prompts, stripping out information that should not be going out, or replacing it with technologies that can still get you similar results but keeping your data safe. That's one way if you're a small organization yet want to use the biggest and largest models around. But actually, if you have a little bit more bandwidth, you may want to use some of the open source models and bring them in-house within your ecosystem, fine-tune them. And what's interesting is we are just looking at the biggest and best models to answer everything. But actually the future could be, SLMs is a word that's bouncing around. Small language models, which sounds, counterintuitive. Sorry, large models are large. That's why they're smart. That's why they're good. But specific use cases for small language models within your ecosystem is another way to safeguard this. And finally, the people element plays a big role. We should be training our people. They should understand the risks associated with data leakage. And more importantly, your legal team should be working very closely with you to set yourselves up so that, for example, large organizations don't store your prompts or they don't use your outputs for other purposes other than what you have intended them to. So there's many, many different ways.
And I guess that's your point there is really, if you extend it, that's about having a robust governance framework and how you build all company company-wide trust in those AI systems, not just in a particular division. Are there particular keys with that? I mean, presumably, obviously, tone from the top, leadership from the top is important, but systematically, how do you achieve that?
Maybe I can give it a go, and then Helen can also have hands-on experience with this, I'm sure, and how she's using it. But from our perspective, I think the best way is to get individuals' hands dirty with the technology for them to safely use this within our environment. So then they know what's possible and what's not possible. And I always say this when I'm talking about this technology, you should really focus on the limitations of the technology as opposed to what it can do. Focus on what it cannot do to really get a feel of how you can use this in your day-to-day job. So one of the things we are doing here is making this available to the organization as a whole so they can use it. Today, more than 175,000 colleagues in 80 jurisdictions are using our horizontal Gen AI tools. They're all getting some benefit out of that. More than 30,000 developers are writing AI code today. And I'll give you another way that we're building up comfort with this. And this, I think, is worth considering for other organizations also. We have AI champions. These are people within each business, first, second, and third line, who are particularly enthusiastic about technology. Identify those individuals, make them the champions, and help them spread that word. We have around 4,000 AI champions in Citi spreading that work. So training provided, which we do across the board to all our colleagues globally. That training very much doesn't give you the technical details of this is attention mechanisms. You should spend your own time learning that. What our training tells them is this is how to use AI responsibly across the organization. And most recently, we just rolled out, prompt engineering. What are the best approaches to using that prompt effectively? I hope, Alex, you and Helen, you have been doing this training. If not, it's time to do it.
Up to date, up to date. Helen, anything you'd sort of add to that?
Yeah, I think they make perfect sense what Prag was saying, right? So governance is very important, and then obviously training and upskilling is the key. Maybe what I could say is from the investment manager's perspective that we heard in terms of a successful adoption, typically is more the carrot and stick approach combined. So you have top down as well as bottom up. So similar to what Prag was talking about, you have to have that kind of central team. I guess previously we had the center of the excellence team that kind of driving the AI agenda in a way that's kind of allowing people to see what AI potentially could do for them on the different business area. You have the top down, like, okay, we have our Jane and saying how important it is embracing the technology and then being able to kind of allow us to explore, experiment with all the tools that we have. So similarly, on the investment management side, those that have higher adoption rate tend to be that the top layer, management layer, embracing the technology, lending the support financially as well as kind of strategically. Then you have a central team kind of allowing them to work with the individual business areas and also to help them see the possibilities and at the same time understanding the limitations. So, you've come back to the kind of data security, privacy, the perspective. You really need to educate the employees so they know what they can and cannot ask the tools to do, and being able to kind of ring fence that as well to Proc's point. If you are the kind of smaller firms and may not necessarily want to spend so much money on the state of the art models, you don't have to. You can use the open source and again, to Proc's point, specialized vertical type of use cases, and it will just deliver equally good outcome for what people are looking for.
We've also got the regulatory context, which no doubt lots of our clients are thinking about. Just walk us through, Helen, how people are thinking about that.
Yeah, so I guess in the first report when we published that, it was right in the middle of the kind of EU AI Act coming to force. So definitely there are a lot of concerns about how the regulations, the landscape will shape up, whether other regions will follow the same path. So far, it hasn't been the case. Most of the regulations that we've seen recently is really more pro innovation and a little bit like kind of lenient if you think about the actual AI usage. But it does highlight the intention from regulators that someone will need to be held responsible if things should go wrong. So from that perspective, I think human in the loop will remain the case. If you think about it from the fund manager's perspective, fund management perspective, they do have fiduciary duties. So if you have something that's driven by AI end to end, where's the kill switch?
I mean, there's so much to unpack here, of course, but maybe I could sort of ask us to sort of begin to close. And if you think about everything that you're watching, that you're keeping an eye on, first Helen, then Prag, what are you most excited by, or what do you think is going to most excite our clients in terms of the applications of AI? It could be today, it could be forward, 2, 3, 4 years. Maybe start with you, Helen.
I guess in a way, we highlighted in the reports that we see the convergence of the fundamental and quantitative investment styles. That's one, because now your fundamental PM teams are basically equipped with typically the quant type of tooling, and if everybody's looking at similar thing, you kind of end up pretty much the same place where quant become more fundamental, fundamental become more quant. That's one thing. And if you're talking about a couple of years down the line, I guess whether that's not a distant future, like you would have a fully fledged AI fund managers sitting alongside human fund managers, being overseen by probably the CIO and so on, being the human in the loop, having the final checker function. I don't think it's that distant in terms of becoming a reality.
You're hearing that from certain investors, that aspiration to get there.
Yeah, being able to basically replicate how a seasoned investment professional picks stocks, for example, using models, using
Yes,
machines.
I remember in one of our interviews with a West Coast client, Helen, they described it as today it's a bit like having a 2 to 5 year sort of up and coming analyst working for you, but actually within a short amount of time it'll be like having a 20-year grizzled veteran investor working alongside you as well. So the point is it's only going to get better. Prag, to you with that question.
Yeah, I will support both your viewpoints. We are at the tip of what this technology can do. We're at the tip of the iceberg, and this is the most exciting part about this technology. So in the next couple of years, we can see agentic AI getting more powerful. And one of the exciting things, and some organizations are starting to talk about it, is what do agents in the workforce mean or look like? Is it going to be this hybrid approach where you as an individual are managing individuals, but maybe some agents also in a way that deliver value to the organization? So what does that mix look like? I think that's super exciting.
Agents as colleagues.
Agents as, yeah, maybe that's a stretch or not, I don't know yet, but there is certainly a concept there where agents will be doing some of the work. And because they're partially autonomous and are going to get more autonomous, what does that mix look like for you as a manager? And the other terminology that's very well used, and I think Helen just used it here, was, we today have humans in the loop. The idea is that humans will then be on the loop, and eventually the humans will be out of the loop, which is very much a terminology used in other areas. So what does that look like for a business of whatever size, and what risk and governance mechanisms need to be in place for that to happen? Exciting times, tip of the iceberg. One quick comment that I always like to quote Charles Darwin wherever that I can, because I really like where he comes from. It's not the strongest of the species that will survive. It's not the most intelligent either. It's the one that are most adaptable to change. And I think the most exciting part is there's a lot of change coming up that everybody needs to adopt, and that's also exciting.
That's a great line to finish on. So, look, Helen, Prag, thank you both very much. Obviously, lots up on citigroup.com, which we published under the Insights tab. Thank you. I'm sure we'll hear more from you, and look forward to continuing the conversation, no doubt, next season.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much to unpack in that conversation, but 3 things that stand out to me. Firstly, hearing from Helen how generative AI and agentic AI are fundamentally reshaping the investment process, tantalizing us with the notion that maybe we might even see an AI fund manager before too long. Hearing from Prag how organizations of all sizes are thinking about the critical tasks of succeeding in AI implementation, making that an all-organization effort, including thinking about that buy versus build dilemma. And then finally, thinking about the governance framework that you need to introduce for this to be successful, bringing not just your regulators with you, your investors, but all of your employees on this journey. So all that remains is for me to remind that you can go to citigroup.com, look on the Insights tab and find the report AI in Investment Management if you're interested in that topic. And otherwise, thank you for joining us. Look forward to you coming to us next time.
The speaker's views are their own and may not necessarily reflect the views of Citi or any of its affiliates. All opinions are subject to change without notice. Neither the information provided nor any opinion expressed constitutes a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security. The expressions of opinion are not intended to be a forecast of future events or a guarantee of future results.